universe, in Captain Kira O'Connell's professional opinion, was a vast cosmic septic tank, and she was the one holding the plunger. Her current mission, a punishment detail masquerading as a vital service, was to plunge a particularly clogged drain in a dead system nobody had bothered to visit in a millennium. It was a metaphor so on the nose that even the bureaucrats who assigned it must have patted themselves on their slimy, pseudopod-adorned backs. Her command, the 13th Exo-Tactical Scientific Recon Company, was a collection of careers the Galactic Concord had flushed, and their ship, the Pest Control, was the grime-streaked vessel they were circling the drain in.
I still maintain that the rat was a significant morale booster,
Ko said, leaning back in her command chair, which squealed in protest. The chair, like everything else on the bridge, was a masterpiece of second-hand misery. On the main view screen, the debris of a long-dead fleet hung like metallic ghosts in the black, but the argument on the bridge was far more immediate. "It is a rodent, Captain," Dr. Mordecai Vence stated, adjusting his glasses. He looked less like a ship's officer and more like a tenured professor who'd been mugged for his tweed jacket and left with a slightly too tight Concorde jumpsuit. "A rodent brandishing a plasma rifle. It undermines the very concept of a multidisciplinary rapid response unit."
"We're a garbage crew, Mordecai. The rat fits the brand."
From the small galley alcove just off the bridge, a voice boomed. "Brand or not, your last high-G maneuver to dodge a piece of floating slag just flattened my Grand Gâteau Soufflé. I had achieved perfect structural integrity. Perfect! It was a crime against cuisine." Fridge, a man whose shoulders were wider than the galley doorway, emerged wiping his hands on a towel tucked into his belt, next to a heavy-caliber rivet gun he'd affectionately named Meat Tenderizer.
"My apologies to the soufflé, Fridge,"
Ko said without a hint of apology.
"Tell you what, next time a piece of shrapnel is heading for our reactor core, I'll be sure to check on your pastry first."
"I'd appreciate that," Fridge grumbled, his huge frame seeming to absorb the low light of the bridge. A series of anxious, high-pitched chitters came from the engineering console, where a multi-limbed arachnid was strapped into a custom-built crash couch.
"My sensors indicate the soufflé's passing has created a significant dip in ship-wide morale,"
Lieutenant Flick said, her 8 eyes blinking in a frantic, unsynchronized pattern.
"Also, is that Class C debris cluster supposed to be vibrating at a resonant frequency with our port nacelle? Is this when we explode?"
"We're not going to explode, Flick,"
Ko sighed, a phrase she uttered at least twice a day. Before she could continue, the main screen wavered, replaced by the wobbling, gelatinous face of Prefect Glick. He was a glutton, a species that resembled an underlit jello mold with a superiority complex. "Captain O'Connell," Glick gurgled, his voice slick with condescension. "I trust the punishment, pardon me, the redeployment is proceeding as scheduled."
"Couldn't be better, Prefect,"
Ko said, her voice dangerously cheerful.
"We're cataloging, we're hauling. It's a real thrill-a-minute gig. My crew was just commenting on the profound existential beauty of it all."
Glick's form quivered.
"Indeed. We at the Concord believe in finding the right task for the right species, and for Deathworlders, a certain aptitude for refuse management seems only natural. It is, after all, what your home planet excels at producing."
A cold silence fell over the bridge. Fridge's hand strayed towards the meat tenderizer. Ven's jaw tightened. The prefect either didn't notice or didn't care.
"See to it that you catalogue every last scrap. We wouldn't want any untidiness."
He let out a series of wet, bubbling sounds that was the glottal equivalent of a hearty chuckle. It was a disgusting, patronizing noise that echoed the entire galaxy's opinion of them. He laughed at them. Literally, he laughed at the garbage crew from the garbage planet. Then he was gone, replaced once more by the silent starfield. The echoes of his laughter seemed to coat the bridge, a foul, sticky residue. K.O. stared at the screen, her cheerful mask gone, replaced by a look of flinty resolve. Fridge cracked his knuckles, a sound like stone grinding on stone. Even Flick's nervous chittering had stopped, replaced by a low, angry thrum.
I am detecting a non-standard energy signature,
Flick announced, her voice a little steadier than usual. The residual anger had seemingly burned away some of her anxiety.
It is unusual, very old, but with an active low-level power source, originating from that derelict.
Flick gestured with a slender, chitinous limb towards a shard of wreckage larger than the others, a vessel whose lines were wrong, unsettlingly smooth and alien. Mission parameters state we are to catalog debris from the Harad-Velian conflict only, Ven pointed out, ever the stickler for rules he had no intention of following himself. That ship does not match any known design from that era.
Good.
K.O. said, a predatory grin spreading across her face.
That means it's not garbage. That means it's salvage.
She pointed at the engineering console.
Buttons, you're with Ven. Take the shuttle, check it out. I want to know what's keeping its lights on after 1,000 years.
From the back of the bridge, a chair swiveled round. Tech Sergeant Buttons Tran grinned, her eyes sparkling with the unholy light of someone who views safety regulations as friendly suggestions.
Finally! I was about to resort to aesthetically recalibrating sonic toilets. You can only make a privy play The Ride of the Valkyries so many times before it loses its charm.
Just try not to blow anything up until you've confirmed it's worthless,
K.O. ordered.
My dear Captain,
Buttons said, patting a device on her belt that looked suspiciously like a fusion-powered can opener.
I am a professional. The explosions will be tasteful, elegant, and entirely intentional.
The shuttle ride over was short and silent. The alien ship loomed, a piece of obsidian geometry that seemed to drink the starlight. Inside, the lack of sound was a pressure in their ears. There was no hum of machinery, no distant crew chatter. There was no dust, no sign of decay, no biological residue of any kind. Fascinating, Ven murmured, running a gloved hand over a wall that flowed into the floor in a seamless curve. Not just sterile, purified. Whatever happened here, it was more extermination than battle.
forget the decor. Look at this interface.
Buttons was practically vibrating with excitement in front of a console that resembled a pool of solidified mercury.
No buttons, no keys, no touchscreens. It's all direct synaptic resonance. The builders must have been telepathic.
Or they just had very, very fancy fingers, Ven countered dryly. Buttons ignored him, her focus absolute.
I think I can rig a bypass. If I just piggyback our comm system onto their network, I might be able to coax it into telling me its life story.
She pulled out her jury-rigged datapad, a chaotic nest of wires and blinking LEDs, and began carefully plugging it into the alien console.
Gently, gently. Just need to find the right handshake protocol. There.
A sudden burst of static crackled through the bridge speakers of the pest control. The secondary monitor displaying Button's EVA telemetry flickered wildly, then filled with a waterfall of untranslatable code. KO sat up straight.
Buttons, what did you just do?
Before Buttons could answer, the cascade of alien symbols stuttered warped, and then reformed into something terrifyingly familiar. The sigil of a top-level encrypted Concord diplomatic channel. The static on the audio feed resolved into clear, confidential conversation.
Oh dear,
said Auntie MAIM, her voice emanating from the ship's comms. The G2 hospitality bot chassis she inhabited, currently parked next to KO's chair, tilted its head.
It appears Tech Sergeant Tran has done something naughty. We seem to be listening to someone else's private conversation. That's not very polite, children.
The main screen, which had been displaying the silent alien vessel, flickered. It resolved into a secure, heavily encrypted Concord channel. A round-table meeting was in progress, populated by the faces of some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. A hawkish avian general, a silicate hierarch whose body was a lattice of black glass that seemed to bend light around it with arrogance, and a hulking mammalian chancellor. And right in the middle of them, his glutton form practically smug, was Prefect Glyke.
The final preparations are complete,
The avian general was saying, his voice a sharp squawk.
The restructurer is in position. The Basan miners have almost finished installing the last of the gravitational amplifiers. And the target?
The silicate hierarch asked, its voice a series of sharp, resonant clicks. Glick's form wobbled with satisfaction.
Deathworld Designation 13, or as its noisy inhabitants call it, Earth.
He spat the name out like something foul.
Project Clean Slate is a go. The geological restructuring will be catastrophic for the apes, but the mineral access will be unprecedented. A permanent solution to our little pest problem.
On the screen, a simulation played out. A small, barren moonlet, its surface glowing with an internal, hellish light, broke orbit. It spiraled gracefully, terrifyingly, towards a familiar blue and green marble. The simulation showed the moon's gravitational drive firing, not to propel it, but to warp the space around it, creating a tidal wave of solid rock. Earth's crust buckled, cracked, and then melted under the strain. The planet became a sphere of molten slag.
Total surface sterilization.
The avian general noted with clinical approval.
Efficient.
And there's no chance of the humans discovering this,
the chancellor rumbled. Glick gurgled his wet, disgusting laugh again. The same laugh he'd used on them.
The humans? They're a joke. Too busy squabbling amongst themselves and sending their most incompetent fools out to collect our trash to ever notice. Who would even listen to them if they did?
The feed was a ghost, an echo from a hidden relay Buttons had accidentally activated, but the words were as solid as iron. On the bridge of the pest control, the crew could only watch, the air on the bridge suddenly thin and cold. Fridge stood in the galley doorway, a heavy metal spatula in his hand. He was squeezing the handle so hard the thick steel was slowly, silently bending in half. Then, for the first time since KO had known him, was speechless. His face was a pale mask, all academic detachment stripped away, leaving only raw, naked shock. Flick was huddled in her chair, emitting a low, mournful hum, the empathetic backlash of 1,000,000 projected deaths washing over her. KO stared at the image of the burning earth. Her knuckles were white as she gripped the arms of her chair. With a sharp, deliberate movement, she reached out and slapped the console, cutting the feed. The screen went black. The mood on the bridge had gone through a phase change. The simmering frustration, the gallows humor, It had all been boiled away. What was left was cold, dense, and dangerous. She swiveled her chair, her eyes sweeping over her crew. She saw their shock, their horror, and underneath it she saw the same thing she felt building in her own chest. A rage so pure it was crystalline.
Auntie?
Ko said, her voice quiet, almost a whisper, but it cut through the dead air of the bridge like a scalpel.
Set a course for the nearest Concord comms relay. Maximum burn.
The AI's optical sensor glowed a soft, comforting blue.
Of course, dear. Shall I plot us a course that avoids the nasty asteroid fields?
Plot a course through them, Ko commanded. I want the fastest possible route.
Fridge finally dropped the ruined spatula. It clattered to the deck. What's the plan, Ko? Ko looked from his face to Ven's, to the huddled form of Flick. Her eyes were chips of ice.
The galaxy thinks we're a joke,
She said, her voice low and tight.
We're done being polite. It's time for the punchline.
Relay Station Epsilon 9 was an automated Concord communications hub, a lonely metal spider spinning webs of data across the sector. The pest control, pushed to the very edge of its structural limits, dropped out of FTL with a groan of protesting metal.
I have the Priority 1 diplomatic channel open,
Buttons announced, her usual manic energy replaced with a focused intensity. The code was one she'd lifted from a pompous attaché's datapad years ago, saving it for a rainy day. A planet-killing conspiracy, definitely qualified as a monsoon. Ko stood before the main screen.
Patch it through to Earth High Command. All of them. Fleet Admiral Peterson first, if he's not too busy polishing his medals.
The connection snapped open. The face of a stern, gray-haired man in a starched uniform appeared. Fleet Admiral Peterson looked at them with undisguised contempt. The faint designation of the pest control must have been visible on his screen.
Captain O'Connell,
He said, his voice dripping with ice.
to what do we owe this unauthorized use of a flag officer level priority channel? Did you find a particularly shiny piece of garbage you felt I needed to see?
Admiral,
Ko said, skipping the pleasantries.
we have uncovered a conspiracy at the highest levels of the Galactic Concord. A plot to destroy Earth. We have proof. A recording.
She had Auntie play the clip. The simulation of Earth's destruction. The casual discussion of genocide. Glick's sneering dismissal of humanity. Peterson watched, his expression unchanging. When it was over, he sighed, a long theatrical sound of weary disappointment.
Captain, you were assigned sanitation duty as a last resort. It was either that or a court-martial. Is this truly the length you'll go to weasel your way out of a punishment detail? Fabricating evidence, slandering our galactic partners.
This isn't fake, Admiral.
Ko shot back, her control fraying.
This is real. They're calling it Project Clean Slate. They're using a weaponized moon.
Enough,
Peterson snapped.
You are a disgrace, O'Connell. You and your entire crew of rejects. You are hereby ordered to stand down and await escort to a military brig. Your priority code is revoked and a warrant is being issued for your arrest. You are officially designated as renegades.
Peterson out. The screen went dark. For a moment, the hum of the ship's life support felt deafeningly loud in the absence of any other sound. They had tried to be polite. They had followed procedure. And they had been laughed off the stage again. The universe, it seemed, had a very sick sense of timing.
Captain?
Flick chittered, her voice trembling with genuine, full-blown panic.
Proximity alarm! A very large, very fast, very heavily armed vessel is decloaking off our port bow.
KO didn't even need to look at the threat plotter. She knew. Auntie Mame's voice was as serene as a summer afternoon.
Company's here, everyone. I've put the kettle on, and the forward plasma cannons.
The view screen flickered to an external view. Hanging against the stars was a Concorde Peacekeeper-class cruiser. It wasn't a patrol ship. It was a hunter-killer, sleek, black, and bristling with weapons emplacements. It looked like a shark that had evolved to swim in the nightmares of engineers. A lance of blue-white energy shot from its prow.
Evasive action!
KO yelled, throwing herself into the command chair. The pest control lurched violently, the hit glancing off their aft shields, which flared and died with a scream of overloaded capacitors.
Report! Aft shields are gone!
Buttons yelled from her station.
Main FTL drive is fluctuating. One more hit like that and we'll be sublight only.
Is this when we explode?
Flick squeaked.
It feels very much like this is when we explode.
Not today, Flick.
KO snarled. She scanned the nav chart. The Peacekeeper was faster, more agile, and ludicrously more powerful. A straight fight was suicide. A straight run was a delayed suicide.
That asteroid field we came through,
She said, a wild idea forming.
The one I told you to plot a course through.
Then looked up, his face pale. You can't be serious. The gravimetric shears in there will tear us apart.
It'll tear them apart faster,
KO retorted.
They're a scalpel. We're a brick. Bricks do better in a rock fight.
She jammed the throttle forward, aiming the lumbering garbage scow directly at the churning, chaotic field of rock and ice.
Auntie, divert all available power to the inertial dampeners and the forward deflectors. Fridge, strap in. This is going to get bumpy.
The pest control plunged into the asteroid field. Alarms blared a symphony of impending doom. Metal shrieked as small impacts hammered the hull. The Peacekeeper followed, its needle-like form less suited to the brutal environment. It fired again, but its shots went wide, striking asteroids that blossomed into silent fireballs.
They're gaining!
Buttons shouted over the din.
We're too slow!
A larger projectile, a plasma torpedo, streaked towards them.
Auntie, fire point defense!
KO ordered.
Certainly, dear.
The AI replied.
Leading the target. And pop.
A volley of tracer fire stitched across the black, impacting the torpedo. It detonated prematurely, but the shockwave caught the pest control, sending it into a wild, uncontrolled spin. The main FTL drive, already damaged, gave out a final, pathetic cough of sparks and a puff of acrid smoke.
FTL is offline!
Buttons confirmed the obvious.
We're dead in the water! No, we're not!
KO grit out, fighting the controls.
We're just creatively immobilized.
She looked at the nav chart again, a desperate glimmer in her eye.
There! The resort moon of Iridia. It's the only habitable body in this system. If we can use the last of our maneuvering fuel, we might be able to make it.
Trailing plasma like a wounded animal bleeding fire, the pest control limped out of the asteroid field. The Peacekeeper, having taken a few dings of its own, had fallen back, likely assuming they were finished. They were wrong. They were just getting started. Viridia was a jewel, a neon-drenched paradise for the galaxy's obscenely wealthy. Its cities were glittering spires. Its oceans were engineered to be the perfect shade of turquoise, and its air was perfumed with the scent of money and self-satisfaction. We can't land in a main spaceport, Ven noted. We'll be identified and arrested in minutes.
We're not landing,
KO said.
We're crashing. With style.
She guided the crippled ship towards the dark side of the moon, towards the service and maintenance sectors the tourists never saw. She found what she was looking for. A massive, cavernous grotto carved into the rock, designated on the public charts as a geological maintenance overflow. In reality, it was where the resort dumped its garbage. With the last of their maneuvering fuel and a prayer to whatever god looked after fools and garbage haulers, Keio brought the pest control down. The ship slammed into a mountain of refuse, screeching and groaning, before coming to a rest in the shadows, hidden from prying eyes. The shuddering stop was followed by a moment where the only sound was the settling groan of tortured metal. Then, a collective groan from the crew.
Status report.
Keio rasped, pulling herself upright.
We're alive,
Buttons said, her voice shaky.
but the ship is a wreck. FDL is fried, the port thrusters are slack, and I think the coffee machines are unionizing.
So we are stuck,
Fridge said flatly.
We're not stuck.
Keio corrected, a manic glint in her eyes.
We're on shore leave. This moon is crawling with the richest, most decadent citizens in the Concord. They have the best technology, the best parts, and the worst security, because nothing bad ever happens in paradise.
She looked around at her ragtag crew.
Our job is to blend in, acquire the necessary components to fix the ship, and get out. We're going to be the worst tourists this place has ever seen.
Their attempt to blend in was not merely a failure, it was a masterclass in catastrophic social interaction. Fridge, tasked with acquiring high-grade power converters, found his way to a gala hosted by a celebrity chef famous for his molecular gastronomy. The chef, a pompous avian with plumage that shifted from peacock blue to emerald, was presenting his masterpiece, a deconstructed nebula made from aerated foam and edible light particles. Fridge took one look.
Your aeration is all wrong,
He declared, his voice cutting through the hushed reverence of the crowd.
The bubble structure is inconsistent. It lacks integrity. This isn't a nebula, it's a salt spill.
The chef fluttered his feathers indignantly.
How dare you! This is the pinnacle of culinary art!
This,
Fridge said, gesturing at the wobbling foam,
is an insult to bubbles.
The argument escalated. Voices were raised. Foams were compared to properly whipped meringues. It ended with Fridge demonstrating the proper use of a whisk, a massive industrial one he'd brought from the ship, and the celebrity chef being bundled away by his security, sputtering about the barbarism of Deathworlders. Buttons, meanwhile, was on a mission to liberate a microfusion core from a civic monument. She located the target, a fountain in the center of a plaza that projected holographic images of the resort's most lavish donors. She deemed it tacky.
Function without form is a crime,
She muttered to herself, disabling the security grid with a device that looked suspiciously like a bedazzled hairdryer. She successfully extracted the core, but couldn't resist leaving things better than she found them. She rewired the fountain's holographic projector and planted a few very mild shaped charges.
A little aesthetic upgrade.
She grinned, hitting a detonator. The fountain erupted not in a destructive blast, but in a perfectly synchronized explosion of glitter, confetti, and strobing lights, while the holographic donors were replaced with the image of the cartoon rat from their ship, now breakdancing to a thumping bass line. The public's reaction was a mixture of confusion, delight, and panic. Ven's approach was the most intellectually disastrous. He'd tracked a notorious crime lord, a hulking reptilian named Vorlag, to a private casino. Vorlag was known to use an untraceable, encrypted comms network, a network that used processing chips they desperately needed. Ven's plan was not to steal the chip, but to convince Vorlag to give it to him. He approached Vorlag's table, cleared his throat, and tapped the crime lord on his scaly shoulder. "Pardon me," he said. "I have a brief presentation that I believe you will find illuminating." He held up his datapad, which displayed the title slide. "Aggression, Acquisition, and You. Unpacking your fraught relationship with your larval stage progenitor." Vorlag stared at him. "My thesis," Ven continued, undeterred, "is that your deep-seated need for control stems from a fundamental insecurity developed during your egg clutch phase." He swiped to the next slide, which featured a picture of a baby reptile looking sad. In the background, the first melancholic synth notes of Gloria Gaynor's "I Will Survive" began to play. It was, by all accounts, a compelling and well-researched presentation. It was also the last thing Vorlag heard before he ordered his guards to seize the insolent mammal with the depressing music. Flick, tasked with the simple job of being a lookout, was the one who inadvertently brought the whole fiasco to a head. Panicked by the escalating chaos, she was trying to hide behind a buffet table when a brutish resort security guard shoved her.
Out of the way, bug,
he grunted. Flick stumbled, falling face first into a towering platter of complimentary Viridian sea kelp clams. For most species, they were a delicacy. For Flick's arachnid physiology, they were a biological apocalypse. The result was immediate and spectacular. They were arrested, of course, all of them, rounded up by resort security and thrown into a holding cell, a monument to their collective incompetence.
Well,
Ko said, breaking the silence in the holding cell.
on the bright side, we're all together again.
Their reunion was cut short when a smarmy, well-dressed man appeared on the other side of the energy barrier. He was the resort administrator, and he looked at them like they were a particularly fascinating new species of vermin.
"Ordinarily," he began, "such a chaotic and vulgar display would result in immediate, unceremonious disintegration. However,"
He smiled, a wide, predatory expression.
"the guests are bored. They crave novelty, and a band of clumsy, violent Deathworlders is nothing if not novel."
He gestured grandly.
"So instead of a quiet death, you will be given a public one. You are to be the main event in tonight's grand arena spectacle. A fight to the death against the magnificent, the terrifying Krogar."
An image of their opponent appeared above him. It was a hulking, four-armed beast of muscle and rage, with a face only a xenobiologist with a death wish could love. The administrator's smile widened.
"Try to put on a good show. The crowd loves it when the scrappy ones struggle."
He walked away, chuckling. Later, as they were herded into the arena's prep area, the sound of the crowd was a deafening roar. An announcer's voice, dripping with theatrical contempt, boomed through the stadium. "And for tonight's main event, a special treat. A crew of bungling primitives from the infamous Death World 13. Let's give a big Viridian welcome to the galaxy's biggest joke!" The crowd erupted in a wave of derisive laughter. It was the same sound they had heard from Gleich, from Peterson, amplified 1,000 times. They were the punchline again. This, however, was where the 13th was different. They might be a disaster at cocktail parties, but in an arena, facing down a monster for the amusement of a hostile crowd, oh, honey, this was their forte. The gates opened. They were shoved into the sandy arena floor under the glare of 1,000 lights. The beast Krogar was released from the opposite side, roaring its fury. The announcer laughed. Let's see how the Deathworlders handle a real predator! Fridge cracked his neck. He'd managed to palm several items from the arena's gladiatorial prep station, which was conveniently located next to a catering kitchen. In one hand, he held a massive steel meat cleaver. In the other, he brandished a large cast-iron frying pan. Right, he said, a grim smile on his face. Time to tenderize the meat. He charged, not with fear, but with the professional fury of a chef whose kitchen has been invaded by a particularly large, ugly pest. He met the Krogar's charge with a deafening clang of pan against claw, holding his ground against the four-armed monstrosity. Buttons, meanwhile, had spotted the control panel for the winner's ceremony pyrotechnics near the arena wall.
Ooh, sparklers!
She chirped, dodging a swipe from the distracted beast. While Fridge kept it busy, she darted over, pried the panel open, and started rapidly rewiring.
A little bit of this, a dash of that. And we have party favors!
Within seconds, she had fashioned a series of flashbang grenades from the fireworks igniters and magnesium powder. She tossed one. It detonated with a blinding flash and a deafening bang, disorienting the Krogar and half the security guards. Ven wasn't a fighter. He was an observer. He noticed the Krogar kept shaking its head, roaring in pain even when Fridge wasn't hitting it. It was agitated by something else.
The shields!
He yelled over the din.
The arena's containment field is emitting a high-frequency hum! It's driving the poor creature mad!
He turned to Flick.
Flick, Auntie Mame hacked your comm unit before we were captured. She's listening. Can you feel the frequency? Describe it to her.
Flick, huddled behind a decorative pillar, closed her 8 eyes, forcing herself to push past the terror and listen with her empathetic senses.
It's sharp,
She chittered.
like broken glass in my mind ears. I need more than that, dear.
Auntie Mame's calm voice whispered in her comm unit.
Describe the shape of the sound. Give me the data.
Flick took a shuddering breath, her professional training warring with her instinct to flee. She focused, translating the raw agony into engineering terms.
It's not one frequency. It's a clean primary sine wave, the base carrier for the shell, but it's being corrupted, shredded.
Her chittering grew faster, more precise.
There are 2 parasitic sawtooth harmonics running counterphase. They're clipping the peaks and troughs of the main wave, turning its smooth curved into a jagged, brutal square wave. The interval isn't just irregular, it's a feedback loop, a cascading chaotic rhythm. It's designed to cause maximum neurological distress.
On the other end of the subvocal link, miles away in a garbage-filled grotto, a grandmotherly AI went to work.
Oh, that does sound unpleasant.
Auntie Mame's voice said in Flick's ear.
Let's see if we can't make it a bit more harmonious.
She fed a counter-frequency back through Flick's comm. Ven held his datapad up like a shield, aiming its speaker at the beast. The device emitted a low, warbling tone, the inverse of the shield's hum. The Krogar stopped roaring. It blinked its huge, dumb eyes, shook its head as if clearing water from its ears, and then sat down with a weary sigh, looking more confused than monstrous. A wave of confusion washed over the crowd, their cheers dying in their throats. The final piece of their escape was, like so many of their successes, a complete accident. A squad of guards, recovering from the flashbang, moved to surround them. One of them, seeing Flick cowering, decided to be a hero. He grabbed Flick's arm to haul her to her feet.
Come on, you freak!
It was a catastrophic mistake. The guard's gauntlet was made from a synthetic protein that had been cultured using, of all things, trace elements from the Viridian sea kelp clam. The residual allergens made contact with Flick's skin. The reaction was immediate and far more potent than before. Flick's entire body swelled to twice its normal size. Her chitinous plates turned a vibrant, alarming shade of purple. And then, with a sound like a punctured pressure cooker, she released a dense, opaque cloud of paralytic vapor from every pore on her body. It wasn't lethal, it was just effective. The vapor billowed outwards, and every living being that inhaled it, guards, the announcer, the corrupt resort administrator in his skybox, and the entire front 10 rows of the jeering audience, froze in place. Their muscles locked, their mocking expressions frozen on their faces. In the ensuing chaos and the spreading purple fog, Ko grinned.
"Well, team,"
she said, clapping a stunned Ven on the shoulder.
"I think our work here is done."
They slipped out of the arena, leaving behind a pacified beast, several dozen temporarily paralyzed guards, and a very confused, very quiet audience. Back on the pest control, the mood was grimly triumphant. They had scavenged parts from a stolen luxury skiff abandoned in the panic. The ship was spaceworthy, though Buttons lamented that the new fusion core regulator, stripped from a high-end pleasure yacht, was offensively beige. They were alive, they were free, and they were fugitives with a planet to save and less than a standard week to do it. Ko gathered them on the bridge. The cartoon rats still danced on a secondary monitor, a forgotten remnant of a simpler, more frustrating time.
"All right,"
she said, her voice devoid of its usual sarcastic edge.
Plan A was to warn people. Plan A was a spectacular failure. They laughed at us. They called us liars. They sent a hunter-killer after us, and they put us in a cage match for their amusement.
She looked at each of them, at Fridge cleaning his skillet with grim determination, at Ven adjusting his glasses, his mind already calculating probabilities, at Buttons tinkering with a device that sparked ominously, at Flick sipping a post-anaphylaxis recovery broth, looking less anxious and more annoyed.
"The old plan is dead,"
Ko continued.
"So, here's the new one. We're not going to stop the moon. We're going to take the moon. They want to use it to wipe us out? Fine. We'll use it as the biggest, ugliest bargaining chip in galactic history. We're done trying to be heard. We're going to make them listen."
Their first move was not an attack, but a prank of cosmic proportions. It was Ven's idea, executed with gleeful malice by Buttons and Auntie Mame. A direct accusation will be dismissed as propaganda from renegades, Ven had argued. But confusion, paranoia, that's a virus that spreads from the inside. Auntie Mame, with a level of digital finesse that bordered on black magic, hacked the Galactic News Network. They didn't dump the entire recording of the conspiracy. That would be too simple, too easy to deny. Instead, they sliced it into tiny, context-free 2-second clips. A glutton celebrity chef was demonstrating a recipe for pulsating grub loaf when, for just a moment, the screen flickered to Prefect Glyke saying,
"Permanent solution to our little pest problem,"
before cutting back to the chef. An advertisement for a luxury cruise line was interrupted by the avian general's sharp voice saying,
Total surface sterilization. Efficient.
A solemn news report on trade negotiations was briefly replaced by the simulation of the restructurer melting Earth's crust. They branded it with a slick, intrusive graphic. Galaxy's most sinister elites, complete with a catchy, ominous theme tune. The public was mostly baffled, but within the Concord cabal, the effect was immediate. They had no idea how deep the leak went, They didn't know who was broadcasting it. They started looking at each other with suspicion. Who had betrayed them? Was it a rival? A subordinate? The paranoia began to fester. The rogue broadcast did not go unnoticed by others who had felt the boot of the Concorde on their necks. A cryptic, heavily encrypted message found its way to them, routed through a dozen dead-drop servers. It was from the Petron, a species of silicon-based life forms who resembled animate sculptures of layered sandstone. They were master miners, and the Concorde had exploited their labor for centuries, treating them as little more than sentient digging equipment. KO, Ven, and Fridge took a shuttle to the rendezvous point, a desolate, hollowed-out asteroid in a forgotten nebula. The Petron emissaries seemed to absorb the low light, their voices a low rasp of shifting sediment.
"We saw your broadcast,"
The lead Petron resonated.
"The ones who plan to restructure your world are the same ones who rezoned our ancestral mining territories, cracking 2 of our colony worlds in the process."
KO met the deep pits of their sensor orbs. She didn't offer them speeches about freedom or justice or the common good. She knew what they wanted. It was the same thing she wanted.
They see you as tools.
KO said, her voice flat.
They see us as pests. They think we're disposable. I'm not here to offer you a better tomorrow. I'm here to offer you a chance to get even, to have a seat at the table they think they own. We're going to take their favorite new toy, and we're going to shove it down their throats. We could use your help. In return, when this is over, the Petron will have a voice.
There was a long pause, filled only by the faint hum of the shuttle's life support.
"We are not a people of violence,"
the Petron emissary said.
"but we are a people of memory, and we remember the dust of our worlds. We will provide you with the location of the military depot where the restructurer is being prepared, and we will provide you with a distraction."
The depot, codenamed Keystone, was a heavily fortified station hidden in the swirling gases of a binary star system. Stealing a moon from it was insane. Luckily, insanity was the 13th's core competency. The plan unfolded in stages. Far across the sector, the entire Petron mining fleet declared a sudden, system-wide labor dispute at a critical Tibana gas refinery. It was a massive, unprecedented strike. The Concorde, panicked at the disruption to their supply chain, diverted the bulk of the Keystone Depot's fleet to mediate the dispute with overwhelming force. As the warships warped away, the battered pest control slipped out of the gas clouds.
They've left a skeleton crew,
Buttons reported. Her right hand keyed in override commands while her left swiped through station schematics, isolating the defense grid controls.
but the station's automated defenses and internal energy grids are still active. One wrong move and we'll be vapor.
That's my cue.
Flick chittered. This time there was no fear in her voice, only intense concentration. Strapped into a modified sensor chair, she closed her eyes.
I can feel it. The flow of power. It's like a river. There are eddies, currents, and quiet pools. Captain, if you follow my directions precisely, we can drift through their sensor grid without making a ripple.
KO's hands were steady on the controls.
Lead the way, Flick.
For an hour, they performed a terrifyingly delicate ballet. The lumbering garbage scow maneuvering through invisible tripwires of energy based solely on the empathetic senses of an anxious arachnoid. They docked at a maintenance airlock, the station systems utterly oblivious to their presence. The interior was a ghost town. Fridge moved like a shadow, his customized rivet gun now fitted with a suppressor. He dispatched the few remaining skeleton crew guards with silent, mostly non-lethal compressed air rounds that hit with the force of a battering ram. They reached the main control center for the restructurer's mooring clamps and drive systems. It was sealed behind a paradox state lock. Buttons cackled. She produced a device that looked like a coffee maker with a casino chip glued to the side.
I call it the paradox decoupler. It won't break a lock, but it will confuse the hell out of it by introducing a paradox based on the probable winnings of a rigged game of chance.
She plugged it in. The lock's security lights flashed chaotically and then, defeated by sheer absurdity, turned green. They were in. The small, barren moonlet floated just outside the station's main bay, held in place by massive energy umbilicals. It was time for the grandest of grand theft autos. Gaining control of a moon is not like stealing a ship. A ship is designed to be flown. This was a rock that has been crudely and violently forced to accommodate an engine. Buttons bypassed the ignition locks while Flick interfaced directly with the drive's control network, her tele-empathetic engineering sense the only thing capable of interpreting the utterly alien system.
I have control!
Ko shouted from the pilot station, which she'd hardwired into the moon's systems.
Or at least a deeply unsettling advisory role.
The gravitational drive is hungry.
Flick chittered, her whole body vibrating.
It doesn't want to push. It wants to pull. It's warping the space around us.
Fire it up!
Ko ordered. The stellar engine at the heart of the moonlet ignited. It didn't roar. It created a profound and terrifying silence as it devoured the ambient energy around it. The small moon lurched, not forward, but sideways, as Ko wrestled with forces that could unmake stars.
The physics are all wrong!
Ven yelled, trying to interpret the navigational data.
It's not moving through space, it's making space move around it. Steer with the gravity, not the thrust.
With a groan that echoed in their very bones, the restructurer ripped free of its moorings. It slid out of the depot, a pockmarked sphere of rock trailing a wake of distorted space-time, and accelerated into the deep black. Their target, the Apex system, site of the Concorde's annual Peace Summit. The Concorde Station Unity was a breathtaking spectacle of self-congratulation. Ornate, golden, and vast, it hung in the black abyss of the Apex system, a monument to the power of the elite. Inside the main assembly hall, representatives from hundreds of species listened as Prefect Gleich stood at the podium, his gelatinous form shimmering with sincerity.
It is in times of challenge that we must reaffirm our commitment to trust,
He gurgled, oozing hypocrisy.
to cooperation. It is only by working together, hand in pseudopod, that we can ensure a peaceful and prosperous future for all.
He was interrupted by a low, powerful vibration that shook the entire station. A gasp went through the crowd. On the massive viewport behind the podium, which had been displaying a serene starfield, a shadow was growing. It grew larger and larger until it blotted out the stars. It was a barren, ugly, pockmarked moon, glowing with a contained, malevolent energy, and it was parked in an orbit so close it seemed you could reach out and touch it. Every screen in the assembly hall, every comm unit, every datapad flickered to life. The smarmy face of the news anchor was replaced by the tired, grim, and absolutely furious face of Captain Kira O'Connell. The battered bridge of the pest control, hard docked to the surface of the weaponized moon, was visible behind her.
Good evening, ladies and gentle beings,
she said, and her voice echoed through the silent, terrified hall. A slight, dangerous smile touched her lips.
This is the 13th Exotactical Scientific Recon Company. The Joke. The garbage haulers from Deathworld Designation 13.
She leaned forward, her eyes burning with an intensity that crossed the light years. Prefect Glyke stared, his glutton form frozen in horror.
We've decided we're done being polite,
Ko said, her voice dropping to a deadly calm.
We have some notes on your agenda.
The feed cut, leaving the assembled delegates with nothing but the silent, terrifying image of the moon filling their viewport. The opulent, gilded hall of the Concord summit was utterly still, the assembled delegates frozen in a stunned, terrified tableau. The laughter, finally, had stopped. On the bridge of the pest control, Fridge walked onto the bridge and began handing out sandwiches.
Roast beast, he said, from Veridia. Tastes like victory.
2 weeks later, the pest control still floated in a quiet, watchful orbit around the Concord station Unity. Its companion, the weaponized moonlet they'd taken to calling Big Benny, hung beside it, a silent, pockmarked testament to a paradigm shift. On the bridge, the mood was one of profound, weary satisfaction. A galactic news network report played on a secondary screen, the anchor speaking in hushed, reverent tones about the Apex Accords, a new, sweeping treaty that had been drafted in a panicked, record-breaking 72 hours. The old Concord cabal had been dismantled. Its members, including a now infamous Prefect Glyke, were facing charges of conspiracy and attempted genocide. Earth, no longer a galactic punchline, had been granted a provisional seat on a new governing council, alongside the Petron and 2 other species who had come forward with their own stories of Concord restructuring. Ko watched the broadcast with a half-empty mug of coffee in her hand. She looked tired, but the flinty resolve in her eyes had been tempered into something that looked dangerously like contentment.
You see,
Venn said, not looking up from his datapad where he was cross-referencing media reactions.
A carefully curated application of existential dread followed by an overwhelming show of force. It's textbook xenopsychology. They'll be teaching this at the academy, though I doubt we'll get credit.
Fridge emerged from the galley, a platter of something steaming and delicious in his hands.
Victory stew, he announced. Made with real vegetables, not nutrient paste. We're moving up in the world.
He placed a bowl in front of everyone. Flick, monitoring her console, let out a soft, almost confident chitter.
My empathetic sensors indicate the galactic approval rating for polite discussions is at an all-time low,
she said, taking a bite of stew.
Hostile takeovers of celestial bodies, however, are pulling surprisingly well. Speaking of which,
Buttons chirped, leaning back in her chair with a headset on.
I was just on the horn with the Petron. They have some fascinating ideas for aesthetic upgrades to Big Benny. We're thinking less instrument of planetary annihilation and more mobile diplomatic embassy with a really, really big deterrent. I'm thinking holographic plating, maybe some tasteful pyrotechnics for formal arrivals. Let's finish our lunch before we turn the doomsday weapon into a disco ball, Buttons,
Ko said, a faint smile on her face.
Oh, do listen to the captain.
Auntie Mame's voice chimed in from the ship's comms.
And finish your stew, children. You have a conference call with the new provisional government at 1400 hours. They want to discuss the terms of your official pardon and your new charter.
The AI paused.
And do try to look respectable. We have a reputation to maintain now.
Ko took a slow sip of her coffee and looked out the main view screen at the ugly, beautiful rock they had stolen. They were still the 13th, still the junk haulers, still a crew of rejects and misfits on a ship that smelled of burnt circuits, but something fundamental had changed. They were renegades and heroes, a galactic joke with a planet-cracking punchline. Their new charter was still being written, but they all knew what their job was now. Someone had to take out the trash.